In this lecture, we're going to be talking about Vray Light. So I just finished up with the Vray Sun and I wanted to delete everything. So I'm just going to select the Vray Sun. I'm just going to delete it. And as you can see, if I go to rendering now, I will also still have light because I still have the environment on. If you delete the sun, that will not delete the environment. So you have to go to rendering, environment, and I'm gonna delete the Vray environment. So don't use the map, that would be okay, or you can just clear it out and have nothing in here. Now if I render, I'm gonna have a black environment and no light, so it's going to be all black. Now I'm just gonna work with Vray Light. So I'm gonna go Vray Light and we'll start with the plane. Okay, so I have different types. I'm just gonna go through them in a second, but I will start with the plane. Just gonna click and drag, and as you can see, I have a light now. Just gonna move it a bit upward, and you can see there's a plane and there's an arrow, which means the direction of this light. So I'm just gonna rotate it a bit, and this is a Vray light plane. Now, if I render in here, you can see that I already have a light, and this is my light, and I can see the light is visible, and definitely the effect of it. Great. Now, if I like this light or not, I can just play around with it. I'm just going to select this light and go to the modifier to modify. First of all, I'm just going to turn off the light, and definitely when the light is off, there's no more light. So it's black. Turn it on, then it's on. I can also change the size of the light. So I can make the length maybe bigger, as you can see, and maybe the width also bigger. And as you can see now, the light is bigger. Definitely the light spread is bigger. So now as if I just made the light more intense, but just the same intensity, but just bigger. If I go down, the units, I'm just going to use default image, but definitely if you need to have more a specific light with this exact measurement of light, you can use some other more technical lights. But in my case, I'm just going to use always the default image. The multiplier is basically the intensity of the light. How strong is the light? So if I put 1, it's going to be just very low. And maybe 20, 30, 50, and so on. As you can see, it's getting stronger and stronger. So I'm just going to keep it 30 as it was. And this is my light I want. The color of the light, I can now use the mode color and change the color wherever color I want using my RGB values. Or you can use, instead of color, you can use the temperature, which is going to be the Kelvin scale of the light, technically the warmness of the light, how warm it is or how cool it is, okay, depending on the temperature. If you go down with the numbers, it will become warm, and if you go up with the numbers, it's going to become blue and cool. Okay, as you can see. So it depends on the values you want. These are basically real values. If you go and buy any bulb from the store, you can see that there is a temperature, which is a Kelvin scale. It says, so this bulb is warm light, it is 5,500 Kelvin, K. So this is basically how the light should look like. And if it's going to be a cool light, maybe 6,500, which is going to be some kind of cool blue or maybe cool light. So it depends on the value, how blue it is or not. So this is basically more realistic lighting for regular bulbs, which are warm and cool. But if you want something maybe weird light, maybe a different red light, for example, which is not that often you will find, but you can change it from here and put whatever color you want, as you can see. So it depends which one you want to work with. Now I'm just gonna keep it white, okay? And I'm just gonna go down. If you want, you can add a texture to that. Instead of having a light white, I'm just gonna go here to a map, and I'm gonna add a bitmap such as materials, the same as materials. And I'm just gonna get, let's say, this texture that I've worked with before. And as you can see, this light is now this texture, as if I just put this kind of paper over the light, and as you can see, the light is a bit different now. So I'm just going to show you before and after. Okay, it's getting some kind of blue, and definitely a bit the light is less intense. because it's having this kind of a blue color on it, so it's kind of less intense, as you can see the difference. Okay, if definitely I've changed this into another texture, for example, I'm just gonna get the brick one. Okay, you can see it's more warm now because the colors are different. So this is very good if I want to have something like a screen, and maybe a light, an area that's getting an image out of it as a light, let's say a TV screen or whatever. That would be a good option. I'm just gonna turn it off, and I'm just gonna clear this out. Okay, so this is basically it. Now, if I'm gonna go down, I'm just gonna go to the option tab. The option tab, as I've said, inside the Vray sound, that's the same in here, but in here I have more options. So I'm going to go through this in details. That's definitely applicable on the Vray sound. First of all, I'm going to start with the Exclude tab. If I go to the Exclude tab, you would see I'm going to end up with two tables. These are the tables of the scene that I have. So I have the box, the plane, and the teapot, which are these. And here are the elements or the objects that I want them to be included or excluded from the light. Now, in my case, it says exclude. So I'm excluding nothing from the light. So that's why everything is lit. So if I go, let's say, to the teapot and jump through it over here, okay, and then I will do a small render in here. I'm going to say okay, and then render. As you can see, the teapot is excluded from the light. So the light is not pointing the light on the teapot. It's not included in the light. So just the box and the plane. So if I go include again, and instead of teapot, I'm going to say include the teapot. So I'm just going to include the teapot in my case. So if I render now, only the teapot is going to be inside the light, or basically targeted by the light, while the box and the plane are not. So this is very, very important if you're having some kind of light, especially when we're working some kind of fake lights. I want to have a light specifically on this object, or maybe this light I wanted to have light on all the object except on this object, so I can just go include and exclude. At the same time, when we go include and exclude, I can include both or exclude both the illumination or the shadow. I can just exclude the shadow from this object, or I can exclude only the illumination on this object and have its shadow. By default, most of the time we will use both. I want to exclude or include both the shadows and the illumination. Very specific cases, I might exclude just, for example, the shadow. For example, I'm just going to exclude the shadow. As you can see, there's no shadow on this teapot, but it's just lit. Okay, so maybe I'm just going to exclude the illumination of it. So as you can see now, I just did it, I think. Yes, I did. So it's excluding this. Great. Now I'm just going to go back to normal. I'm just going to exclude nothing. Okay, so everything is going to be lit. That's the first option. The second option, okay, I'm just going to make it something like that, and I'm gonna make it small. It's a bit too big to make it to have something like more sharp light. Okay, and render. Okay, I'm just gonna make the intensity a bit more. Definitely the light is smaller, so the intensity is small, and I'm gonna make it maybe 100, 200, 300. Okay, so that's basically it. Now, as you maybe a bit more, I'm just gonna make it a bit bigger because it's very tight. I'm just gonna make it wider and in this direction, and definitely I'm gonna make the light a bit less in this case. Okay, now as you can see, the second option is other than the exclude is cast shadow. So as you can see, this light is casting shadows on the objects. If I say don't cast shadow, then no shadows will be casted. This is definitely used on lights that are fake lights, that are not a real source of light. Definitely it will look wrong. In my case, definitely this is going to be a cast shadow. If I have another light in here, and it's gathering light in this direction, maybe I don't want to have shadows over here. I can just say, just fill the light in here, just give me small light so I won't have black in here, and without casting shadow. I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna rotate with copy. So shift and rotate, I just copied this, and then I'm gonna move it to this location. I'm not sure exactly, I can just check it from the top. I think this is good. And definitely, intensity of this should be much, much smaller. So I'm just going to make it on. Okay. So now I turned it off so I don't see the effect. I'm just going to turn it on to see the effect. Okay, on. Okay, as you can see, I'm just adding a small light, maybe less than 10, maybe 5. Okay, just to have this kind of not having the black over here. I'm just adding a small light over here just to give it a bit of light, but still darker in here, but not black. Okay, but you can see I don't have shadows. So if I want to take off the shadows or just have the shadows on, it depends what exactly you want. So in this case, I'm just going to keep this light here, or let me delete it and go back to my original light. Okay. The second thing is basically double-sided. If I put double-sided on this, as you can see, the light is going to be lit from both sides. So it's going to submit rays from this direction and the other side. So that's why you can see there's light on the other side. So because I just pressed double-sided. Sometimes I need that, sometimes I don't. It depends. Invisible is important. In this case, for example, I have this light and everything is nice, but I don't want to see this light. So I just press invisible. And everything will remain the same, just the plane of the light will be invisible. Great. No decay light, as you can see, if I just press on no decay light, you can see that this light won't die. It will remain constant and will go forever. If you say decay, as you can see, the light will start dying within distance, and which will give us more realistic light. It depends what kind of source light you're needing, or this light what you want it to be. If just you want to send a light and you don't care about just decaying, just you can press no decay. Okay. A skylight portal, it won't make sense if I press in here, it's going to be black. But skylight portal is very useful when I'm working with some kind of scene which is closed, let's say an interior or something. The skylight portal is always placed on the windows and doors and openings, any opening that I have, that would help out. It's going to be a portal for the skylight and will let the environment go through inside these ports to have more and rich light inside the scene that's closed. Okay, we will go through that more into the example that we're going to work with on the practice. Now, store with a radiance map, I'm not going to talk about it, so we're not going to use it. As for these options, I have the effect diffuse. Definitely, if I turn off effect diffuse, nothing will be lit, so no diffuse. Effect specular is basically the specular won't be seen. Technically, I don't have materials on those, so I won't see the specular and I won't see the reflection. Okay, so if I have something like glass to that or whatever and it's reflective, I won't see the reflection on it on the teapot or the glass that I'm having. Okay, so these are specific, and if I don't want, for example, I want this light not to affect light, I want to see just the reflection and specular on it, so I can turn off diffuse and have these on. These are more used when I'm working with more product design, and let's say I have a good lighting, but I want to add some kind of reflection at a certain point. I can just turn off diffuse and put my light in a specific location and direction to get some kind of nice specular on it, or maybe when I'm animating to that. So it comes like more specifically, but we were gonna go through it maybe in the example also in the practice. That's basically it. So I've just went through all the details of the light. Now, the important thing of lights is basically just to place the light and have a good lighting, because the lights, it will make or breaks the scene. If you just put the light in a very good way and very consistent and in smart positions and have light, realistic light, it will give very good feeling to the scene. But if you did something wrong and you have very harsh lights or very dim lights and not really consistent, they don't work together, you're going to break the scene and it's going to look really ugly. Okay, so now I just have this kind of light, but now I'm going to change this light, the type of light, from plain to something else. First, I'm going to start with a disk. The disk is exactly the same as the plane, but it's circular. Okay, so I have the radius of that, so I can make it, and other options are exactly the same. So that's why I just went through it. I'm not going to repeat it again and again. So now if I go render, you will see this is a circular light, okay, not planar. Great. Now, other than that, I can change this light to spherical. Spherical is basically just a sphere, like a bulb. It will just lit all directions. So I can put it in here, for example, and I can render. And as you can see, it will lit this side and this side and in the front and in the back. It's just like a bulb. Okay, so that's a sphere. And the third option or the fourth option is basically mesh. Mesh is technically doesn't matter where you put it. If you put it anywhere and I just render, you can see that it's gonna just give a light. Okay, but what's more important about the mesh is not just this kind of rectangular or squarish mesh is a light. It means I just have to add it. So the only difference between the mesh and the others is I have to go in here inside mesh light. I have something called pick mesh. So I'm just going to go to the modify, pick mesh, and I'm going to make this teapot to become the light. So as you can see, if I select the teapot, now it's a teapot, and now it's a V-Ray light. And it has the same parameters as the V-Ray light. So if I render in here, you can see that now the teapot is the light, and any mesh or any geometry I want, I can make it a light. For example, I have some kind of text or some kind of design or whatever. For example, I'm just having okay, I'm just gonna have some kind of lines. For example, this kind of circle, just make it simple. I'm gonna make it definitely renderable. Enable render, enable viewport. Just gonna add thickness to it. For example, something like that. And interpolation, I'm just gonna make it smooth. That's it. So I'm just gonna make sure that this line is gonna be meshed. Before, this circle is just a line. So all I need to do is add an edit poly to it, become a mesh. Now if I select this V-Ray light, I can go to mesh light instead of the teapot. I'm just gonna select this circle. Okay, and now if I render, you would see that this circle is just a light, and I'm gonna have some kind of neon light. Okay, I can have a text, I can have a design, I can have a logo, I can have whatever I want to have this kind of effect and have something like something different. That's the same thing applicable. Instead of having V-Ray light mesh, I can have a V-Ray light material and have a material on that. That works almost the same. Okay, definitely the material, they have the different parameters, but in here it's more like a light. I can make it cast shadow, I can make it invisible, I can make it affect diffuse and specular and so on. And the light material is a bit more just gonna emit light, and I can give it the intensity, and if I want a color or a text or a texture, sorry. That's basically it. The last option is basic. I just have I think I've deleted teapot by mistake. Teapot, and I'm going to just create another teapot in here. Okay, the last light is basically the dome. Dome lights, it doesn't matter where you place them, okay, because they are environment lights. They come from infinite places, okay, inwards. So if just I place the dome light, same thing as I've said, the same parameters goes on and on. So if I'm gonna go a render, and you can see I have a constant light which is coming from all over the place. So if I go in here, intensity multiplier, and put it, let's say 5, so you would see I have more intensity. I have 10, it's going to be more intense. As you can see, it's just like an environment. For example, if I want the environment to be more bluish, to have this kind of tint to the feel of the light, so I can give it a dome. That's the same thing as the V-Ray environment that I've just placed with the V-Ray sun, but in here I just have one color. In there it has like a gradient of color, let's say blue, and it's changed with the sun. In here I can just place a texture, and I place whatever I want, and that's what I'm going to talk about in later stages, working with HDRIs. Okay, but for now I can just have an environment that has this kind of light, and then add to it another light, something like V-Ray sun or V-Ray light or whatever. So let's say I'm just going to add a V-Ray light in here, and sorry, just going to rotate it like that, and add the intensity maybe 100, and that's it. This is what I'm gonna get. So I'm have an environment, and at the same time I have this, and I'm gonna maybe make it invisible, and that's it. So I'm just having a light in here with its shadow, and I have an environment which is filling my scene. And definitely if I want the scene to be a bit darker, just go to the environment and make the intensity less, maybe 5. And as you can see, it's not black, not like that. Okay, I'm just having some kind of environment. Okay, and you can play around with the values to have the best fit. That's basically V-Ray lights. We have 4 types or 5 types of V-Ray lights. We have the plane and the disc, because I consider plane and disc are the same, but just the shape of them, it's planar or circular. Okay, I have the dome, which can be placed as an environment. I have a sphere. Sphere is like basically a bulb, which will lit in all directions. And I have the mesh, is basically any odd geometry that I want it to be a light. Instead of having a simple shaped light, I can have a complex shaped light. For example, a character, maybe a statue, to make it lit, or maybe a book, or maybe a teapot, or maybe any object, a text, maybe a sign. I want it to be like a neon light, so I can just work with V-Ray mesh. That's basically everything concerning a V-Ray light. Okay, we will definitely talk about details more, or maybe practical, in V-Ray lights and V-Ray sun in our practical project later on.